We moved to a small town when I was 13. It was a nice town even though it was small. It had two grocery stores, two clothing stores, a hardware store, two cafes, a gas station, and a fast food place. It was close enough for everyone who lived in this small town since we hardly got any visitors or tourists. That's how it was for years. When I was 16, new neighbors moved into the house next to us. They were nice but strange. They hardly talked to us. I mean, it was a good morning on the way to school and sometime hello other days, but nothing more. After a week of them there, I noticed a white cat who would come to our yard. It was a small white cat with blue eyes. She would come to my yard and stare at the window. I assumed it was my neighbor's cat, since I had never seen it before they moved in. I tried a few times to go out to see her, but she would always run away. After a week, I brought it up one day to my neighbors. "Hey, good morning, Mr. Duffler," I said. She gave me a small smile and waved. I walked over to the fence and sat my stuff down. "I have a question," I said to her. Her smile faded. "Yes?" she asked calmly. "I have been seeing a white cat in a yard. Is it possible it's your?" I asked her. She had no expression. She just stood there thinking. "Not that it is a problem, it's just," I said. "Yes, but it's best you stay away from her. She's not friendly," she said quickly before running inside. That day after school, I went inside and thought about what she said. Then I heard meow. It was a low and quiet, but I heard it. I looked out my window to see the white cat was staring at me. I thought about what Mrs. Duffler said, but as another meow came, I dismissed the thought and went outside. This time, she did not run. I looked at her blue eyes as she studied me, trying to determine if I was an enemy or a friend. I bent down and called, "Kitty." She looked at me for a moment and then crept closer to me. "Kitty, kitty," I called again. She slowly moved to me, and when she was close enough, I began to pet her. She was not as soft as I thought she would be. Her fur was knotted and clumped with dirt and other stuff, and she smelled horrible. But as I pet her, she began to purr. I gave her some leftover chicken and she meowed happily and ate it. After a few minutes, I decided to go inside. She meowed as I waved goodbye and went inside. This happened for about a week. I would pet her and feed her some chicken and then go inside. But soon I began to notice she would bring dead lizards and leave them at my door when I pet her. At first, I was a little grossed out, but she was a cat. I would throw it away and feed like a normal. At first, it was lizard, then it was bird, but I still ignored it. Then a rabbit. I was shocked, but there she was with a dead bloody rabbit, meowing at me. I gave her the chicken and went inside. I was shocked, but I just went to bed and forgot about it. A few days later, I went outside to see her. Her name turned out to be Ocean. When I walked outside, a horrible smell hit me. I looked to see Ocean sitting there with a dark red stain on her face and around her mouth, and in front of her sat a huge dead deer. I looked at her as she meowed at me, waiting for food. I screamed, and she began to run down the street. Without realizing it, I followed. As she ran down the street, she picked up speed. She was fast. As we got further, I began to not recognize where I was. I followed her into a part of woods I had never been to, and she ran into a huge hole. I figured she had made a small den in the dirt. I crawled down to look inside, but it went further down. I crawled down and down, surprised at how deep it was until I came to a huge room. I could stand up fully in it, though I admit I'm short. I looked around. It was dark, with only few holes used as lights. There was a horrible smell in there. It was the smell of something decaying. I plugged my nose and looked around. Ocean sat and watched me as I looked around. There were little toys and junk everywhere. I walked through the whole place that was surprisingly big until I got to another tunnel. I dug down and entered the tunnel which led to another room. This room was where the smell came from. There were rotting corpses of different creatures, big and small. But what was most disturbing was, in the back, a pile of maybe 5 dead bodies. The corpses were rotting and decomposing. It was a horrible thing to see. I turned to the exit of the room to see Ocean walking in. She sat in front of me. Her blue eyes had faded into dark red. I looked at her as she circled me, debating what to do with me. I took the chance I got and ran out of the room into the first one, then out of the den. I looked around and finally found the road. I looked back to see Ocean chasing me. She was fast and was catching up. I was only halfway home. She soon caught up to me and grabbed my leg with her sharp claws. I screamed in pain as I felt blood run down my leg. My skin ripped as I tried to shake her off. She bit down into my leg. It ripped and I almost fell. But I didn't give up. I grabbed a stick, still running as best I could, and jabbed the cat. She cried as she lost grip and fell onto the road. I picked up speed again, barely able to run, and ran all the way to home. I passed out as soon as the door shut and locked. When I opened my eyes, I saw my sister who sat next to me. She was tending to my leg. "Finally, you are awake," she said. I sat up and looked around. "Don't get up. I don't know what to do with your leg, but it's pretty bad," she said. She looked worried as she cleaned the blood that was still going down my leg. "There's a gash in your leg. It's pretty bad, and I have to take you to the hospital as soon as it is wrapped," she said, a bit shaky. We went to the hospital not long after that, and I got stitches. After getting home, my sister asked what happened. I explained to her everything, but she didn't believe me. It's been about a week now. I haven't left the house much. This morning on TV local news, I saw a girl about 10 had gone missing. Last seen by her parents playing with a white cat. I recently moved to a new city about 5 months ago, and therefore moved to a new apartment. For a bit of a backstory of my apartment, it used to be a factory, but converted to apartment around 20 years ago. In our little village, there are 10 apartment buildings in total, only 2 of which were the part of factory, and rest were built afterwards. There has always been a weird vibe in a unit. You always feel like there is someone watching you. Both my partner and I thought that we have seen things out of the corner of our eyes only for it to be gone when you turn to look. My cat has also been acting strange since we moved here. He was a never whiny cat before, and we hardly ever heard him meow, but now he does it constantly. He will sometimes look like he's chasing something that's not there, and will go to a certain corner in our living room and stay for sometimes 20 minutes at a time. With us being on the 3rd floor of the apartment and the tenants below us having their temperature set high, we have a fan on most nights to keep ourselves cool in the bedroom. My fan does have a timer option, but we never use it. One night it wasn't too hot in our apartment, so we weren't going to bother turning it on. But as I was laying on bed, scrolling through Reddit, I heard the sound it makes when it turns on, and was blasted with cool air, but didn't want to move to turn back off. About 5 minutes after it turning on, it turns itself off again. About 5 minutes after it turning on, it shut itself off again. This has happened 3 times since then. We have also had a TV turn itself on and off again, and a tall lamp in the living room as well. I have had doors that I could swear that I closed be open when waking up, and a cupboard and drawers open as well. We have had instances where things have gone missing only to show up in the weird places. For example, I use a plastic cover that clips on the top of my cat's can of wet food and keep them from getting crusty in the fridge. After taking it off the can to give my cat his food, I couldn't find it afterward. I didn't search too hard to find it, as I didn't need that night because he had already ate the rest of the can as well. The next morning, I was getting ready for work and found it underneath the bathroom sink in the cupboard of vanity. My cat's room is across the hall, and I would have no reason to store it in the bathroom. We have also had instances of pictures and decoration falling off the walls or of shelves, and I've also heard some questionable noises that woke my cat as he would be in bed with us. I know it's not just me overthinking, as my boyfriend has witnessed to some strange occurrences, which helps me feel like a little insane. Many moons ago, when I was in my late 20s, I was a waitress. I worked mostly nights. I had 2 small kids, and we lived in a pretty big place with my aunt. My car had broken down, and my aunt, let's call her H, was taking me to and from work. The roads to and from work wasn't long, but it was curvy and narrow, and very dark at night, even when the moon was bright. The trees were close to the road and grew in an almost tunnel throughout most of the road. This one particular night, it was after midnight by the time we were heading home. H is driving and I am in the passenger seat, counting out my tips. I hear some rustling coming from the back floorboard and asked H about it. At first, she hadn't heard anything, but eventually she did. Her initial thoughts was kitten. We had small kitten at the house, and they were bad for jumping into the vehicle anytime a door was open. We pulled over to the side of the road when we came to a spot that was wide enough so we could have a look. So we had to push the seat up to take a look in the back. There was some newspaper in the back floorboard, and it was these that we heard rustling. We picked everything up, but didn't find anything. Next thought, the breeze from a window. We had them down, maybe an inch or two, was disturbing the paper. No big deal, right? So we got back in the car and continued on. When we started hearing it again, it was quite a bit louder and bigger somehow. This is much more than a breeze, but we try to ignore it until something starts hitting the back of my seat. Not really hard, almost like a small kid lightly kicking my seat. I looked at Edge and said, "Something is hitting my seat." She thought I was trying to pull her leg and didn't believe me. Then it got hard enough that she could actually see me bouncing from the impact. So I, not very smart person that I am, decided to unbuckle my seatbelt and take a peek in the back to see what was going on. No one ever accused me of having all my dogs barking. Edge slowed down a bit and I am on my knees on the passenger seat, facing the back. The back of my seat is still being banged on, but I couldn't see anything. I leaned over the back of my seat to get a better look. When bang, the seat was hit so hard, the locking mechanism that keeps it in place was broken. The whole seat was rammed up into the dash and it slung me into the dashboard hard. I was split open behind my right ear, ended up in the front floorboard. Of course, Edge hit the brake and we were stopped in the middle of the road, which was at least as dangerous as what was going inside the car. I just scrambled back into the seat and buckled my belt and told Edge to floor it, get me home. We were just a couple miles away from home and we took those curves like a race car. As soon as we rode into the driveway, we jumped out and ran to the house. Edge didn't even turn the motor off. It may have just ran out with the gas sitting there. I didn't shut the door and Edge swears neither did she. But they were both closed and the doors locked the next morning. Luckily she had an extra key, but my happy ass never got into that car again.